This is the Ground Game Podcast, where we cover politics from the ground up. Here are your hosts, Tom Lobianco and Patrick Bingston.
Tom, we are 7 days from Election Day as we record this. It is 1 week out from Election Day. I am tired. I am grumpy. I am mad at the world, ready for this damn thing to be over. How are you doing, my friend?
Boy, apparently I'm tired too. I need to unmute my mic. It's in a strangely zen place for having, covered this campaign for 9 years now. I mean, this is people threatened the permanent campaign. Well, we got it. I don't know if it's permanent after this, but my God, it feels like a decade.
It sure does. And we are inside a week. We've got, as we're recording this Tuesday afternoon, in the wake of the Madison Square Garden shit show, pardon my French. The vice president is going to be giving a big speech on the Ellipse Tuesday evening in DC, the same site as Trump's 2021, January 6, 2021, pre-riot rally. I guess is the right way to say it. And she's going to be hitting on that. But in the end, it's coming down to the same states that we thought it would. It's the blue wall. It might be those Sunbelt states, your Nevada, your Arizona. I'm less keen to think that Georgia and North Carolina are totally in play, even though there's new polling in North Carolina showing its height. But my goodness, man, this is going to be desperately close.
It's going to come down to the wire. Absolutely. I look at the messaging, the actions of the campaigns, where they're focusing, what they're targeting on. And, it does feel like at this moment, Harris's best path is the blue wall. It does seem like that goes one way or another. I just, I wrote this over. I've been doing the campaign memos in this last week, and I wrote this at a 24 site, 24 SIGHT.
Plug it.
Sorry, baby. I wrote that the Trump campaign to me has a Hillary Clinton problem, 2016, where the barometers are wrong. They're dated. And I just feel, when I talk with my sources, when I talk with folks out in the field, what I hear about is angry women. Women voters are pissed off, and understandably so. And I think that there are issues which are animating. And I'll tell you that Dobbs, the best I can tell, continues to be an animating issue. So I think that really lifts Harris as we go through this final week.
All right, man. You want to get into it?
Let's do it, baby.
First down.
All right, first down. How bad is the Puerto Rico gaffe?
Bad.
Why?
Legit bad. Because it is extended for 2 days. I never thought that a Sunday rally would actually impact things, but here we go. The lead up to it, the play into Monday, into Tuesday. But we had Mike Madrid on last week, and he made that really good point about how, if you look at why does Trump work with Latino voters, because the way that he talks about it, and is, you argue, equally as racist as what Tony Hinchcliffe said there, is making out new immigrants to be rapists and drug dealers and people who are creating quote unquote shitholes. All right, and by doing that, he gets those Latinos who have been here a long time, third and fourth generation, on his side, because they don't identify with that crowd. But what Hinchcliffe did was he didn't go after new immigrants. He went after the culture. And I mean, I've gone salsa dancing before. All right. Don't mess. Don't mess with culture, man. Yeah.
Here's why I think it matters. And I think it matters in one place for one reason, and it's Pennsylvania.
Yes.
I did not realize until the numbers started to come out that there were 400,000 people of Puerto Rican descent in the state of Pennsylvania. They were going to be Harris voters for the most part anyway, at least those that were going to vote. The thing that I think potentially changes the game here is how many of them are low propensity voters that will be so pissed off by this and blame Trump for this, even though he didn't say it. And if he said it, it may not have stuck because the dude's Teflon for so many reasons. But the fact that it stayed in the news for 48 hours, at least as we're talking about this on Tuesday afternoon, there's a reason to think that this is resonating.
Yeah.
And there's a reason to think that in Philly, in Allentown, in these places where you have these high numbers of Puerto Rican immigrants, or at least people of Puerto Rican descent, they're going to have a absolute conniption about this. And for those that are registered to vote, even if they are low propensity voters or have never voted before, this might be the thing that drives them out.
Yes. I mean, this pulled off. Don't forget too. I mean, you don't have to worry about New York, but they're in the U.S. and Puerto Rico is a part of the U.S. I mean, that's crazy. I feel like that we have to even, mention that. And,
I had a caller on the radio this morning comparing those Puerto Ricans to third world country, coming from a third world country. So yeah, we do have to say it, which may tell us everything about how effed we are as a culture.
But Puerto Rican culture is very ensconced in American culture. New York culture. Look at what this has done, and I think you've seen this too with folks like Charlemagne the God, and this goes to the broader voting trends dynamics. The Trump people want to eat into Black and Latino voters, that share, and move it at the margins. Well, Tony Hinchcliffe, somebody who nobody had ever heard of before, became famous overnight for all the wrong reasons, or maybe for him it's the right reasons, but for most people it's the wrong reasons. He just got Bad Bunny off the bench. You got Bad Bunny in the
5 million Instagram followers.
Yeah,
I mean that's legit. That moves number. That is as big as Taylor Swift in the Latino community.
Yes. This is an influencer election,
and maybe the pro wrestling community too. Apparently, Bad Bunny dabbles in pro wrestling, which
really
know. So
crazy.
But certainly, I don't think it makes people say, well, this D-list comedian, right. which by the way, I am perfectly okay with uncomfortable jokes at the expense of people. I'm a fat guy with white hair. I get it all the time. But there's a difference in a joke at someone's expense or a situation that makes you uncomfortable and just shit talking an entire culture. And that's what this guy did. And it is absolutely inexcusable. And you are judged by your friends.
Yeah.
And if this is the guy who is a validator for Donald Trump, then Donald Trump is validating him. It works both ways.
They made a decision to put him on the stage. That was targeted and strategic.
All right.
It's second down.
All right. So the Department of Justice has smacked around Elon Musk. Tom, you broke this story because you're a real legitimate reporter. Tell us all about it.
Okay, so here's what happened. Last week, the Justice Department Public Integrity Section, the Election Crimes Branch, sent a warning shot to Elon Musk and his super PAC. And I wrote about this broke the news over at 24 Site News, 24sight.news on the Substack machine, where we also carry the great and wonderful Ground Game podcast. And I'll tell you that they sent the warning letter to Elon Musk saying, basically, you're vote buying. What you are doing with this is in violation. It's like U.S. Code 103.52, subsection 7, subsection C. I'm not a lawyer. And that you got to stop this. And they specifically said, look, this carries real penalties up to 5 years in jail. Okay. So what was interesting about that is that Musk Super PAC, which is it's the entire Ron DeSantis, like the plug and play campaign, the old Super PAC. It's the same team. They actually stopped doing it for about 36 hours. All right. And there's some question of whether they'd stopped it entirely. All right. And then they picked it back up again on Thursday. They seem to think that this is fine, that it's, this is all kosher. But I'll tell you, there seems to be some real legal trouble with it. And at the end, the core of it is this argument, again, very Trumpy. And I've had this discussion with some of my Republican sources about whether Elon is now eclipsing Trump in that wing of the nationalist populist. Because what he is doing is very Trumpy, walking up to the line of something illegal, potentially breaking the law, and then thumbing his nose at everybody with it, getting a lot of free exposure in the process. And so right now what's going on is, checked in with DOJ, no comment from them this week. The Philadelphia district attorney is filed a civil suit in Philly, trying to get them to stop. It's some serious legal action going on here.
Here's I think we need to have a conversation about Musk. This is a guy who is one of our largest defense contractors.
Yes.
And one of our largest federal contractors in general because of his NASA contracts. He's openly having conversations with Vladimir Putin. He's openly trying to influence an election, which will benefit him personally and professionally.
Mm-hmm.
His electric vehicle company its viability is based on federal tax credits and federal incentives and goals in this Green New Deal sort of thing to force people to buy EVs. And yet he still has a security clearance. And he's allowed to do these things with all of these gigantic conflicts of interest that he's involved in. This is a huge problem that people aren't talking about.
It is remarkable. I remember during the Ukraine stuff. Still during, it's still ongoing.
It's still going.
Still going.
It's still going.
It's I think it was Ronan Farrow wrote that great piece maybe about a year ago about Elon's interactions in this, and the use of Starlink. And I'll tell you the thing, I just can't shake it. I mean, like this image of like Jonathan Pryce from I think it was the second Pierce Brosnan Bond movie, literally owns a global satellite network, this guy exists outside of any laws. And that's the way he behaves. The justice, this is not the only example of this. They got, other federal cases going on regarding Musk and his companies. It reminded me a lot of Jeff Bezos when he just decided, well, you know what? Got these contracts. I'm worried about Trump getting back in. We're not going to do an endorsement. That might hurt me. You have the billionaire class, and specifically the big tech billionaire class, behaving more like the laws don't apply to them. And a lot of it has to do with this superstructure that they own. I mean, everyone's focused on the Washington Post and Jeff Bezos, and there has been a significant amount of attention paid to Amazon, but he owns the backbone of the internet. Amazon Web Hosting Services.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like 100 years ago. I've had this discussion with a number of sources. I mean, this is like the robber barons of old.
Yeah. Ugh, brutal.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Right. We are in this moment right now.
By the way, as a Bears fan, I realized that clip was from Washington football team / Commanders games. And I heard that way too many times over the weekend. And I don't want to talk about football. Because it makes me very, very mad. All right. So our third down topic is Harris's closing message working? There was a story in Politico today, Tuesday, about concerns in Michigan that Kamala Harris's pivot to the strategy of Trump bad, Trump threat to democracy, Trump fascist, Trump all these things, which are inherently true by all factual barometers, isn't going to work in the end, at least as we reach the penultimate day or days of this campaign. That the argument is that after 9 years, if you don't know Trump sucks by now, you're not going to know Trump sucks. And that she should either be leaning on abortion because that's where she brings out women, lower propensity voters, or needs to try to cut into Trump's lead on the economy, which I don't think she should do because she doesn't have a good answer on the economy. Still doesn't have a good answer on the economy. And until she starts talking about the price of milk and gas, then I don't think she should, because she doesn't have a plan on those things. Abortion is moving the needle for her. And I think you see in focus groups and polling that it's not an issue that people bring up unprompted, but when you bring it up to them, specifically women like 25 to 49, then it starts to move the needle. Should she be focusing on Trump, or should she be focusing on abortion, or should she be focusing on something else?
If I was a Democratic strategist, I would say go hopey changey. And here's why.
Or the first 2 months of the campaign.
Right. Well, that not only was it working, it gets to the key elements. So a couple thoughts on it. The key elements. Moving forward, or making a race about moving forward. When you play the Beyonce Freedom song, it rhetorically it captures freedom and moving forward. It hints at a lot of things without saying anything specifically. Okay. And you can rip that for sure for not being specific, but with the coalition that you're trying to carry over the finish line here, it gets you that positive message, the change, the future, moving forward. This has been played out quite a bit, but maybe it's vibes. Maybe it is the vibes, and we don't know. And look, we don't know yet what she's going to say at the ellipse. I mean, we're going to see that later tonight. There's some indication that it won't just be about January 6th. Like maybe the sighting is a head fake.
And listen, I'm no expert in Democratic messaging because I'm a guy that worked Republican messaging, but I watch in a state like Illinois, which is obviously gerrymandered for Democrats. Democrats have a huge fundraising advantage here. Republican legislative candidates here are getting killed on the issue of abortion. Even in cases where Democrats are essentially just making up Republican positions. There's one Republican legislative candidate in the Chicago suburbs that I've known for years. He's essentially over time thought Republicans moved too far right on abortion, considers himself pro-life. He has a friend in Congress, Mike Bost, who's a super conservative member of Congress, that he gave money to in the primary because it's his friend. He wanted to support him, wrote him a check in the primary. And the Democrats are hitting him, this moderate suburban legislative candidate, calling him extreme on abortion and completely pro-life, completely anti-abortion, making shit up because he wrote a check to somebody more conservative.
Wow.
and it's working in polling. Obviously, the money behind it helps. It is clear that issue, when put at the top of the list, moves numbers for Democrats.
Yep. Yes, that's the one.
And it might be her key. It might be her ticket the last week of this campaign. Okay, it is fourth down. Our last topic. Tom, what happens next week? While we wait, you and I had this conversation on the radio this morning. I'll walk you through my nightmare shit show scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens in your eyes, is in your prognostication, in your maybe worst case scenario, even, we know this won't be called on Tuesday night. Right. I think it's safe to say that we know this won't be over Tuesday night.
Right.
Trump's going to claim victory. We know that, probably by 11 o'clock Eastern on Tuesday night. But what happens after that?
Okay. Well, a couple things. If it looks like Harris is winning, and I've written this a couple times now in my campaign memos at 24 site, that the fundamentals still seem to favor Harris right now, even though it very clearly is a tight race. If it looks like she's winning, you have the Trump legal apparatus, which is far superior to the slapdash operation you had in 2020, which fueled the January 6th insurrection. You have that kick into gear, and they're going to try to delay counting. They're going to try to have ballots thrown out. They're going to do everything they can to rig the process for Trump. Then it becomes, if Trump, after it's called, then it becomes, if he loses, a fight that moves to the House. And he's hinted at this. Now, whether that was a slip or a threat, the Madison
secret deal with Mike Johnson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The hell does that mean?
Yeah. Well, and you know what? Yeah, it's the fear and the paranoia is purposeful. That he's injecting here. That's on purpose. That fear is a tactic. Now, look, if he wins, I'll tell you what's wild, man. I've heard from some of my Republican sources, concerns that Democrats try to steal the election. That is the thing. That's right.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb.
Well, and you know what? They say, arguing that and this gives you a good sense of, the media that's being pushed in the right bubble, the MAGA bubble right now, saying that it'll be the Democrats that try to steal the election. And what do I think realistically happens in that scenario if Trump wins? I think that you have a lot of the progressive groups, liberal groups, pro-democracy groups start lining up in court. If she loses, she loses. I mean, look, the election outcome is the election outcome. Again, that goes double for him. I don't think she's going to come out and say she won or didn't win or whatever, declare things. Reality is reality. It doesn't change. But I mean, the bigger threat of chaos and potential violence clearly is among Trump and his operation. And that's potential.
Here's my fear. Trump declares victory on election night, which we expect. But we won't know Pennsylvania. We probably won't know Arizona. I think it took until Saturday 4 years ago before Arizona was called. Mm-hmm. We probably won't know Nevada until at least the middle of the night, 5 a.m. Eastern, maybe. Mm-hmm. And maybe even later. And if these states are close, and they are so close in the polls, and there were 5 states within 30,000 or 40,000 votes 4 years ago, there will be enough doubt sown that on Wednesday morning, stuff starts to hit the fan. And that means MAGA protests. That means potential violence. That means intimidation of poll workers. and people who count the ballots, and people like Stephen Richer, who's coming up in a moment, who count the ballots. I fear that we are on the precipice of something really dangerous in this country, and it scares the hell out of me. It worries me, and I'm not a sissy. I'm not a run around thinking that the sky is falling kind of guy. I am legitimately concerned about what happens in the aftermath of Tuesday. Legitimately concerned.
You know what, man? Okay, so a couple thoughts on that, and I've been wrestling with this for a long time. The same way, okay, so here's some threats.
And Trump's been preparing these people for war,
right,
for the last 4 years.
There's a reason he showed up wearing the regalia of a militia group, the Proud Boys. Okay, he changed his clothes to signal to that. Again, stand back and stand by, same thing. So, I mean, yes, absolutely. The militias that are out there, the 3%ers, I mean, that threat still exists. Now, that said, national security apparatus, law enforcement, public servants, and this is Bart Gellman wrote about this in the Time magazine cover piece. It was very good. Have also had 4 years to adjust. 4 years to catch up, to watch these things. I mean, one of the critical security failures of January 6th was not taking seriously the chatter on these extremist group, 8chan, you name it. Anything that carrying Pepe the Frog and the white nationalist, not taking seriously all of that. That mistake is not happening again. And when I talk with folks about this and I ask about it, there's a sense that the national security apparatus, the law enforcement apparatus is much more engaged this time around. People learn the lessons of January 6th. Okay, so it's going to be a very different dynamic. It is going to be tense AF. All right, and I'm trying not to curse because that algorithm. All right, but it will be super tense. Okay, I'm a little more confident and optimistic than I was just a few weeks ago. I'll put it that way.
Well, the bottom line is we need more people who can tell the truth. And one of those who has a track record of telling the truth is Stephen Richer, who is the Maricopa County recorder. And we are excited to talk to him.
It's time to go in the huddle.
We are honored to be joined by Stephen Richer, who is the county recorder in Maricopa County in Phoenix, Arizona. Stephen, it is an honor to have you. You are one of the bulwarks of normalcy in Republican politics in recent years, and it's sort of cost you in the end. But we are so thankful you're here. Thanks for taking some time with us.
Yeah, no, some might say cost me, others might say liberated me. So
might do that. So before we talk about the race today, I want to just kind of go back to 2020. And I your hairline may tell us everything about 2020 at this point.
We go right there, right from the get-go.
Can't help it. But look,
okay, I thought we were here to talk about the Bears game from last night. So as long as we're talking about sort of,
feeling triggered here. All right. So, but let's go back. I mean, you follow the law, you do your job. You're getting so much pressure from the Trump people, from the MAGAs, et cetera. Can you just walk us through all the, I hate to go potty mouth in first question, but all the bullshit that you had to deal with in 2020?
Well, following the 2020 election, I didn't really know what to make of it because at the time I thought it was earnest questions, people seeking out information, people seeking to understand the process. And just at some point it dawned on me that this was it wasn't a matter of process. It wasn't a matter of factual discovery. It was a matter of trying to create a theory to get to the conclusion that you wanted. And they became increasingly frustrating. And it also became increasingly aggressive and alarming in terms of the things that were said to me, to my staff, the things that we were accused of. And so at some point, I think around May 2021, my perspective on it changed, and I started getting a bit more aggressive and pushing back because I no longer thought that these people were asking these questions in good faith. And yes, I had significantly more hair then, and yes, it has been a harrowing 4 year ride.
See, Steve, I was watching, prepping for the interview, watching some clips, and you got the time slot on 60 Minutes that would have been Donald Trump's had he actually sat for that interview.
Yeah, so he's multiple times accused me of stealing things, and so in this instance, he was spot on. I did steal his time slot for the 60-minute segment. That was the election segment on Monday night, and it wasn't about Trump. It was just more about election administration in Maricopa County, what we're doing to try and convince people that they can have trust in this process, and then just my story as somebody who's gone through this for the past few years, and just how surreal it's been to have gone from a two-time University of Chicago. I'll give a shout out to good people of Hyde Park, to a Federal Society member, to American Enterprise Institute, to Cato Institute, to somebody who immediately fell out of favor because I was not interested in signing up for something without any basis in fact or law.
So how do you handle? Maybe we can even go back to 2020 into this cycle as well, and the 22 cycle, because Kari Lake was such a significant part of that one. That you're following the law, you're trying to be transparent, but yet there's so much misinformation, disinformation, doubt, and lack of trust in our institutions. As someone who is at the forefront of that, how do you deal with it?
It's tough, and there are certainly some days where I throw up my hands and say, "Are we making any progress at all?" But I suppose the alternative, which is just to quit, isn't very satisfying. And so we have consistently been trying to provide as much information as possible. So we're still operating under the premise that if we answer people's questions, if we show people the process, if we teach people the law, then they will have a fuller understanding, and they will be less susceptible to some of these very bold and plain lies that are shared by many in Trump world. And so we've been doing things like tours of our facility. We've done over 300 tours of the elections facility. We've done teletown halls. We've done live stream tours. We've done articles. We've done papers. We've done reports. We've done videos, just more and more information. And we're probably still being outgunned significantly by the other side in this informational battle. But I think the more sort of fundamental question is whether any of this is, whether you can persuade somebody, or whether this is just sort of a tribal thing. And the bigger the lie, then the more it serves as a marker of your loyalty to the movement. And in that respect, I think there is something to those who call it a quasi cult.
Have you, Stephen, have you seen the temperature? I was watching some of those old clips. I mean, this is, people going to, I used to be a county government reporter years ago when I started out, people showing up to elections meetings, county zoning meetings, school board meetings, if you never would have shown up before, screaming, yelling, issuing death threats, in some cases. But have you seen that increase this cycle, decrease? I mean, what's your sense of the temperature on the ground?
Well, it's been operating in the hot capacity for the last 4 years. Now, there are some fluctuations within that, but everything is totally dialed up. Now, when the cyber ninjas were here in 2021, that was especially emotional, heightened interest, heightened tensions time during the 2022 election. And now, as we lead into the 2024 election, I think those have been some of the high points. But everything, Arizona has just been, and maybe the whole country has just been tense the last 4, maybe 8 years, maybe, I don't know, but it sure seems like on a level that we wouldn't have previously thought imaginable. We can't have county meetings that are open to the public without having a bunch of people come in and shout and say some pretty wild things.
I mean, your Twitter mentions are a hellscape. right? I mean, just awful. And I mean, and I think a lot of this goes back. I mean, obviously there was the 2020 and the pressure on you, the pressure on Rusty Bowers, but it hit like a new fever pitch. It seemed with what you got into with Kari Lake 2 years ago. Can you kind of walk us through that story from your perspective and even just I think my reaction would have just been anger at the things that she was saying to and about me if I were in your shoes. And you were certainly a lot more diplomatic, which is probably why you're still a politician and able to handle things diplomatically. But kind of walk us through, especially for folks that don't know the whole story.
I didn't know Kari Lake other than as a television anchor. She hadn't been involved in Republican Party politics prior to 2021. But in 2021, she came on the scene as somebody who had suddenly discovered conservatism, which seems to characterize a lot of people who are part of this movement, who were never part of it from an intellectual standpoint, who were never, people who had studied it, people who had gone through all the sort of the traditional markers of conservatism. But she found conservatism in 2021, and then she launched her campaign for governor of Arizona in either late 2021 or early 2022. She made a splash at a number of events, and then she got Donald Trump's endorsement, in part because she was willing to, there was no limit to what she would say about the 2020 election and how it was stolen and how Donald Trump was cheated. I didn't have, obviously I didn't care for that, but I didn't say anything about it. I never interacted with her in public. And really, it wasn't until after the 2022 election that Kari Lake started becoming a bigger part of my life, because she was just continuing on. She would go to rallies and she would put pictures up of me and say, this is the man that's cheated me. This is the man who fraudulently injected 300,000 early ballots into our election system. This is the man who manipulated the tabulators to keep me from being governor. It just kept going on and on and on. And this was her shtick at various rallies. And then eventually she even wrote a book in which she retells a dream sequence, which she dreams of me kidnapping her, driving her out into the desert and trying to shoot her. And so it got to be too much, and I'd hoped it would pass. I hoped she would move on, and that didn't happen. So eventually I filed a defamation suit against her.
And what's the status of that?
We have won on the merits. So now all that is to be determined is the damages. So in plain language, that means she admits she lied about me in the 2022 election context. She admits that she did so knowingly or recklessly, and she admits that she did so with malice. But now we will just have a trial on how much did that damage me.
Tom, before I hand it over to you, let me just clarify a couple of things. Did you manufacture 300,000 early votes and inject them into the system?
No, and the thing about this is, of course, truth is an easy defense to a defamation claim. So if you said I stole $100,000 from the bank, and then I sued you for defamation, and then you provided video footage of me stealing $100,000 from the bank, that my defamation claim goes away pretty quickly. And so I hope it goes without saying, because these are, just pretty, these would be the crimes of the century. I did not inject 300,000 early ballots into Maricopa County's 2022 election, and I did not.
You didn't hack your tabulators to elect the person from the other party governor?
I did not.
Okay, good. All right. Just wanted to get those on the record here.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Isn't magically making things up? Why not inject, I don't know, 80 million votes across the states using Chinese thermostats to make yourself president? If that's the case.
I would imagine somebody has probably said something pretty similar to that. And that's when I roll my eyes at some of the outvote the fraud or outvote the cheat that is being propagated now, because according to some of these theories, all we need to do is enter a number into the computer, and that's what the results will be, or that will just tell the tabulators to switch votes from one candidate to another. So I don't really know how you could outvote it. But again, it gets back to, none of this is rational. all of this is so outlandish that if you set it in a different context, people would worry about your mental acuity. But in this context, it just seems to further establish that you're part of the team, that you're willing to give up and suspend anything for the cause, even suspend rational thought.
Do you think that, and I've seen this, covering Trump for about 10 years now, and out at the events, people leaving early, and a lot of the vendors, kind of the money that was attached to this seems to have vanished. I mean, you don't hear a lot from kind of like OG grifters like Mike Lindell anymore. Do you see that on the ground, and do you think that jibes with Lake trying to, some folks would say, put herself through a car wash right now and try to scrub all that off?
Yeah, I think Mike Lindell was the griftee, not the grifter. I think
Mm.
he's lost a lot of money paying different individuals to search for fraud, paying the legal fees of different individuals, and so if he weren't so awful, I would almost feel bad for him because he's lost, by his own admission, something like millions and millions and millions of dollars doing this. But I think that there are still a lot of people who are making a lot of money off of this. In the context of Kari Lake, I think the one way that this hasn't delivered is it has not played well in general elections in swing states. So in Nevada, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Arizona, in Georgia in 2022, this won you the primary, but it didn't win you the general election. And I think that some of these people are saying, okay, we maybe need to soften our tones a bit on that after the primary to try and win this general election. Because I think that if they lose another round of general elections, there will be less and less patience with it, even for some of those diehard people who say, I know that the elections are being stolen from us, but I like it before when, even though they maybe were cheating, we were still somehow winning elections. And so, maybe we should change our strategy.
So you ran for reelection this year, sort of a Liz Cheney situation where the party itself has gone so completely off the reservation. You end up losing that race. It's my guess is that your office is going to end up Democratic after the election. But I think it comes back to the question of, and me coming from Republican politics, we're kind of in the same boat here in that regard, that we've watched our party go from, or at least what was my party, go from the traditional pro-life, low taxes, pro-Second Amendment base issues that were the only things primary voters, at least here in the Midwest, talked about in 2012, 2014, to whatever this hellscape is that we're in today, where they want candidates at all levels, from county board to vice president of the United States, to be willing to lay down their life for this guy. And I guess my question to you, as someone who's seen the brain rot on the ground, what the hell happened?
You're right. I think fealty is the ultimate currency. You can change your position on abortion on a daily basis. You can say that we don't support international trade. You can hate on big corporations. You can hate on law enforcement. But the one thing that you can't do is cross swords with Donald Trump or deviate from the prescribed path. And the number one indicator of your loyalty to Donald Trump is, do you believe that Donald Trump was cheated out of the 2020 election? And it's why you see everyone from Tom Cotton to JD Vance just really struggle when any reporter asks them who won the 2020 election, because they know that it doesn't play well with the median voter. They know that it's embarrassing in front of some of their former friends, but they also know that it's the third rail that you can't touch in this new Trump world of Republican Party politics. So what has happened? I think that part of it is just that all of these politicians care more about their standing in the party and their ability to continue to hold office than they do any higher principle or truth or fidelity to our constitutional republic. And then another is just that so many people hate the left so much, and they see the left as getting worse and worse and worse, that they say, God has given us an unholy weapon, but he's given us this weapon, and by gum, we're going to use it.
Wow. Do you think, and we've had this discussion on the podcast here with a couple folks before. I mean, does it change if Trump loses? Like, if Trump loses in a landslide and takes down a number of Republicans with him, and this would be the 18, 20, 22, fourth time in a row that he's dragged down the party at the ballot box. Again, big hypothetical. Do you think that would actually change anything? Because it hasn't changed anything the last three cycles.
You just described, I mean, you predicted sort of my response, which is I thought it would, but then I thought it would the last three cycles. And it's funny how quickly we've written people off when they've lost races before. So as soon as Mitt Romney lost the 2012 presidential race, he was sort of, okay, that's yesterday's news, and we were on to shinier and newer objects. Ditto with John McCain in 2008. But this seems to be very different. And I would think that at some point people say, enough. And also, like, so much of this movement is anger. And in some ways, it only fuels the anger and the resentment and the otherness and the sort of the oppressed upon nature if you keep losing.
Do you think, in that vein, there's been some talk about potentially a third party, the center right party? I think you heard Liz Cheney float this maybe a week or two ago, of disaffected Republicans, disaffected conservatives, disaffected centrists who don't feel at home in the Democratic Party or the Trump Republican Party. You think that's something that becomes viable?
I don't know about the mechanics of that. I'm skeptical, just given the way that our system is set up. But there's a place, and will always be a need for conservatism. And by conservatism, I don't mean the Republican Party, because parties can and do change. But the writings of Edmund Burke, the writings of Russell Kirk, the writings of Bill Buckley, Milton Friedman, whomever you choose, those ideas are ideas that I continue to subscribe to, and I believe that those are important ideas for any governing structure. And unfortunately, right now, I don't think we have a vessel that is really carrying those ideas to the governing table. And so, how will we? I don't know. I think that maybe the strategy is to just continue to grow those groups of people through different organizations, and then eventually say, you know what, our group is now big enough, and we look in the eyes of the two political parties and say, who wants us? Who's willing to change their party a little bit to accommodate us? Is it the Dems? Okay, well, if it's the Dems, then you got to drop sort of some of the AOC stuff, because quite frankly, it's undoable. If it's the Republicans, well, then you got to drop the madness about stolen elections. You got to drop the madness about how Puerto Rico is just an island of garbage, or whatever else that we just sort of unpalatable. And then we sort of, this is the Ross Perot type strategy where he was never going to win, but he forced people to talk about his pet issues. And I hope we can be bigger than Ross Perot's efforts were, but we might not wrest control in the near future of one of the political parties back, or we might not have a strong third party. But if we are a strong enough voice, then we can at least say, you know what, one of you has, because one of you wants to us, right? Don't you want us? And so I see this a little bit within the Democratic Party. Like, for instance, I actually appreciate that Vice President Harris has reversed her position on fracking. Is it transparently strategic? Yeah, but maybe that's how politics works, and she realizes that there's a home of people or there's a group of people who don't feel at home in either political party right now, and that's her overture to those people, rather than saying, get the hell out, sort of thing.
And now instead of the writings of Russell Kirk, we get the bloviations of Charlie Kirk. And that's today's Republican Party. Stephen, I know we got to let you go here in a minute. Your projection at this point, it certainly feels like Donald Trump's going to win Arizona. Do you agree with that, and why?
I read the same polls that you guys do, which is that they have Trump consistently up, 1 to 3%. I think if I were looking for a why, inflation has hit Arizona and the Phoenix metro area especially hard over the last few years, and then the border is a really big issue here in Arizona, and so and I think that's a place where Vice President Harris has some exposure, and not without reason, and so I think that could explain why President Trump is in a better position now than he was in 2020. Now, that does not seem to necessarily hold for Kari Lake, who is consistently down a bit in the polls.
She's going to get creamed. She's going to get creamed.
I don't know if anyone will get creamed here. I don't think it's our luck to have blowout state. We would love it as election administrators. We would love huge margins on election night.
Yeah.
People would stop paying attention as soon as we release the first results, and it would be lovely. But
what's next for you after the term ends here?
Exploring a few options, and I'm not trying to be coy, but I haven't buttoned that down yet. Honestly, it's sort of survive this is first priority, and unfortunately, sometimes I mean that a little too literally. But get through this, and then do something at most adjacent to politics. But this has put me through the ringer, and so I'll need to take a breath.
Stephen Richard, the Maricopa County recorder, and someone who I admire so much, even before our conversation today. Stephen, you've been honest and full of integrity, and have dealt with so much, again, pardon my mouth, shit in the last 4 years. And you've done it with grace. You've done it with brains. You've done it with thoughtfulness. And thank you for your service. And thank you for all you've done to bring some normalcy back to a world of crazy.
I appreciate it. All right. Well, bear down, Chicago Bears.
Well, we got the Cardinals this weekend. So
we're somehow top of the NFC West, but we're garbage too. So
Steven.
Football, man.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen.
It's time for the second half.
Thanks to Stephen Richer. I am in awe of that dude who has gone through hell and back just to do his job. What an incredible guy, and appreciate him taking some time. Certainly in a week to go before the election, where he's got plenty on his plate. So, all right, let's get to some Q&A before we get out of here. Tom, first one: do the LA Times and Washington Post non-endorsements matter? I think no, in terms of actually like moving votes. Like who is going to read the LA Times op-ed page and say, well, if the Times says so, then I'm voting for Kamala Harris. So I think there are two questions. The voter question is, it's bullshit. No one cares. But the democracy question, the billionaire Trump friendly guy, the billionaire guy who's been attacked by Trump for 4 years, who has a rocket company, who has a huge contract with the U.S. Postal Service, is kowtowing to Trump 2 weeks before the election. That's the stuff that matters more than the actual endorsement itself. And you've worked in newspapers. I've written newspaper columns, but I've never been a newspaper guy. I don't even know if we need editorial boards anymore. But I'm interested in your thoughts.
I mean, it was so ham-handed, and it was ham-handed in the way it was handled, because you could tell it's somebody who didn't care about it. About the way it was going to be perceived. I mean, in a very macabre sense, I have some experience with this, because the place I was, that collapsed before I started 24 Site News, and the whole reason I'm doing this independent journalism thing, the Messenger.
What?
Messenger, more famous in its demise than it ever was when it was around.
How to Blow VC Money by the Messenger.
I think it's the same thing with the newspaper endorsements. This hurt Jeff Bezos more than anything. And I think by revealing the dynamics in play, and it became a crystallizing moment in a way that nobody expected. And it really, again, it's like Elon Musk and the DOJ and the, his actions shines the light on this new class of, like a return of robber barons almost. I mean, hugely impactful, just not in the way that anybody intended.
All right. Our next question is, what is each candidate's high water mark in the Electoral College? I did a little back of the napkin stuff before we got started.
Nice.
I've got Trump's high water mark at 287, which would be Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. I've got Harris at 292, which would be the blue wall plus North Carolina.
Okay.
I really don't think she wins North Carolina. I'm saying that's her high water mark.
Yeah.
Because the poll says it's close. Either way, I mean, Biden Trump was an incredibly close race, and Biden still only got 306, and we're inside of that for both of these candidates.
Right.
So either way, and I don't know what your numbers show, but either way, this is going to be nail-bitingly close. Neither one is in a position to get a blowout in this election.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if there is that potential, and I am highly skeptical of these betting markets. They are influenced and corrupted, and
you're paying way more attention to these than I think anyone else is. These betting markets,
dude. What they've co-opted is the political reporting class, which is that's quite a crown to have. No, I don't trust Polymarket and all these places, but there are a number of people that are talking about them. So I will address this by saying that they're wrong. They're skewed. There are potentials where Harris runs the board. If there's like a tsunami, if that Dobbs vote, shows up, you could have all 7 states. Now, I don't think Arizona and Nevada,
1 in 1,000 for that to happen.
Yeah.
It's more likely for her than for him, but
Yeah.
I don't see any realistic scenario that she carries all 7.
Yeah,
especially with the Arizona polls and the Georgia polls. Right?
Well, we just heard from Richard there that in Arizona with the focus on immigration and inflation. So my guess is that her best case scenario is probably Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, plus North Carolina. Georgia's gotten away from them. I don't see that happening. Nevada, man, boy, what that is going. Some of these John Ralston, he's been tweeting about the early votes coming in.
He's making it sound like a lost cause for Democrats.
Yeah, it's wild, man.
Which you wouldn't expect, especially with Cortez Masto leading handily in the Senate race.
I don't know what to make of that one, but I mean, I think for her, the high water mark is definitely the blue wall, plus maybe North Carolina and Nevada. I think she could still hold on.
Or wait, it's Rosen, not Cortez Masto this time, right? Is it Rosen? Rosen and Brown.
Rosen's up. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Rosen. Yep.
I should know my Nevada politics better. All right. Last one, Tom, before we get out of here. Any Senate surprises? Since I didn't even know the sitting senator from Nevada's name. Well, I knew the name. I just had the wrong one running.
Well, I think, what? I do think not so much Texas, but I bet you Florida could be a big surprise. Abortions.
Yeah, I think Texas flips before Florida.
Yeah. Okay.
Everybody hates Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz's family hates Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz's dog hates Ted Cruz. Remember that picture from the Cancun trip where the dog, the poor little fluffy white guy, is just sitting in the window saying, help me.
It's like
even Ted Cruz's dog hates Ted Cruz.
You can basically hear that dog clawing at during the insurrection. That dog would be wandering the halls clawing at the supply closet, and he'd pop his head out and be like, no room.
Honestly though, I think if we're talking surprise, it's Nebraska. Dan Osborne, who's running as an independent.
Oh yeah, right.
Running this incredibly well-tailored blue-collar, middle-of-the-road. There's no Democrat on the ballot, So he gets to gobble up all of the Democrats. Do you even know the name of the senator he's running against?
No. Oh, Deb Fisher?
Deb Fisher.
Yeah, I know.
Who knows Deb? Who the hell knows who Deb Fisher is?
I know Deb Fisher.
My point is, like, she's made zero moves in her time in the Senate. She's essentially a do nothing backbencher, and Osborne is in a position to maybe sneak out a win. That also could have huge repercussions on who has the majority next year.
Oh, yeah.
Because he has said he's not going to caucus with anybody, which would also be stupid because then he doesn't get committee assignments. He doesn't really get much staff. So there would be issues there. I would assume he comes to his senses and realizes, all right, well, I have to caucus with Democrats. I don't think he'll win, but if there's a completely off the board surprise, it's that.
Okay.
All right. We got a week to go, man. We got a week to go. We can do it.
Got this.
America, we can do it. America, we can do it.
Got this, Joe.
All right. We'll see you next time on The Ground Game.
Peace.